The year is 1969. Neil Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface. The world watches. History is made. But 3 months later, something happens that NASA has never fully explained. They crashed a spacecraft into the moon on purpose, and what happened next wasn't supposed to be possible. The moon rang like a bell for over an hour. Solid rock doesn't do that. Dead planets don't do that. But hollow objects do. And here's the part that will keep you up tonight. A Sumerian clay tablet, written 4,000 years before the Apollo mission, already known. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will never look at the moon the same way again. In 1961, archaeologists excavating the ruins of ancient Nippur in southern Iraq pulled a clay tablet from beneath 4,000 years of sediment. It was written in cuneiform, the oldest known writing system on Earth. When scholars translated it, they expected hymns, trade records, maybe a king's genealogy. What they found was something else entirely. The tablet, catalogued as VAT 11277, currently sitting in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, contained what appears to be a structural description of the moon. Not a poem, not a prayer, a description, with levels, chambers, materials, mechanisms. The Sumerians called the moon a vessel, a constructed object, not a celestial body, a built one. They described 7 internal levels, each with a different function. An outer shell made of material harder than metal, but lighter than water. Internal chambers filled with light that didn't burn, didn't consume fuel, and never faded. And in the third chamber, mechanisms, gears, interlocking systems, designed to maintain the moon's orbit with perfect stability. Now, let that sink in for a second. The Sumerians had no telescopes, no spacecraft, no orbital mechanics. They didn't even have the wheel in its earliest period. So how did they know to describe the moon's orbit as artificially stabilized? 4,000 years before, modern astrophysics would theorize that very thing. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the Sumerian tablet would be easy to dismiss as mythology if science didn't keep backing it up. Let's talk about the Apollo 12 experiment, November 1969. NASA deliberately crashes the lunar module's ascent stage into the moon's surface. The impact is equivalent to detonating 1 ton of TNT. They had seismometers in place. They were ready to measure the response. What they recorded stopped scientists cold. The moon reverberated for over an hour. The vibration pattern was consistent with a hollow or partially hollow object. Dr. Frank Press of MIT, who helped design the seismic equipment, publicly stated that the ringing pattern was unlike anything observed in terrestrial geology. Think about that. The scientist who built the instruments to measure the moon said the moon didn't behave like a solid planet. NASA published the data. It appeared in scientific journals. It was discussed at conferences. And then, it quietly disappeared from mainstream discourse. No follow-up tests, no formal explanation, just silence. Then there's the density problem. Earth's density is 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter. The moon's is 3.34. If they formed from the same material as the giant impact hypothesis, requires that gap is very hard to explain. Vasin and Sherbakov, 2 scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, did the math in 1970 and published a paper with a title that will make you uncomfortable. Is the moon the creation of alien intelligence? They weren't fringe researchers. They were credentialed astrophysicists. And their conclusion, based on the density data and the seismic anomalies, was that the moon was most consistent with a hollow artificial shell. The paper was never formally rebutted. It was simply ignored. But the most disturbing part of the Sumerian tablet isn't what's inside the moon, it's what's on the surface. The text describes a doorway on the moon's visible face in the southern region. The tablet gives specific landmarks, 2 large craters used as reference points, and states that between them, offset toward the terminator line, there are 2 pillars of celestial stone, each roughly 9 to 10 kilometers tall. Between those pillars, a sealed entrance. The Sumerians weren't writing poetry here. They were giving directions. Fast forward to 1994. NASA and the Department of Defense launched the Clementine spacecraft. Its official mission: test ballistic missile defense sensors. But it photographs the entire lunar surface in high resolution. Researchers examining the images from the southern polar region find something that doesn't match any known geological formation. 2 parallel structures, raised from the surface, roughly 3 kilometers apart, perfectly symmetrical. Natural geology does not create perfect symmetry. Erosion doesn't do that. Volcanism doesn't do that. NASA's explanation: a natural ridge, unusual lighting. Then in 2009, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter surveyed the same area with laser altimetry capable of resolving features smaller than 1 meter. When it passes over the formation, the lasers return data from the edges of the structure. But from the center? Nothing. No floor detected. Just empty space beyond the maximum range of the instrument. Independent researchers who filed requests for full-resolution imagery of the area were denied. NASA cited resource allocation priorities. The formation exists in the data. It has been photographed dozens of times. But not one full-resolution image of that specific area has been released to the public. Why? To understand what the tablet is really saying, you need to understand who it claims the information came from. The Anunnaki. They appear in over 500 Sumerian texts across 1,500 years of recorded history. Mainstream scholars call them gods. But read the original descriptions without the religious filter, and something strange emerges. The Anunnaki eat. They sleep. They bleed. They age slowly, attributed to something the texts call the food of life. They build cities using physical materials and organized labor. They travel in vehicles that make sounds described as thunder. They go to war, form alliances, sign treaties. Gods don't do those things, but beings do. The Sumerian king list describes the Anunnaki as arriving from the sky before the Great Flood and establishing kingship on Earth. Multiple texts describe them teaching humanity astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, and written language. The Sumerians didn't claim to invent these things. They claimed to have taught them. And according to the tablet, VAT 11277, one of the things they were taught was the truth about the moon. The text states, and this is the translation that scholars have argued over for decades, that the moon is not a natural celestial body. It is a construct. Brought into Earth's orbit thousands of years before human civilization began. Its purpose: to stabilize the planet, to regulate the tides, to fix the axial tilt, to make sustained life on Earth possible. Before the moon arrived, the tablet claims, Earth wobbled violently. Life couldn't take hold. Here's the part modern astrophysics quietly agrees with. Earth's axial stability is almost entirely dependent on the moon. Without it, our planet's tilt would shift chaotically between 0 and 85 degrees, making stable seasons, stable climate, and complex life essentially impossible. Scientists have known this since the 1990s. The Sumerians described it 4,000 years earlier. There's one final detail in the tablet that I want you to sit with. The sealed entrance door on the moon's surface is described as having no hinges, no visible mechanisms, no physical lock. It opens with sound, specifically a sequence of tones, a code in frequency form. The tablet states the sequence changes periodically, and only those who know the current sequence can open it. In 1903, when this tablet was first translated, that detail was dismissed immediately. Sound opening a stone door? Absurd. Mythology? Move on. But in 2003, researchers at the University of California demonstrated something remarkable. Certain frequencies of sound can cause materials to temporarily change their molecular structure. The phenomenon of acoustic levitation is now used in laboratories to physically move objects without touching them. Sound waves at specific frequencies create standing wave patterns that exert measurable physical force. Engineers have theorized that a material engineered to respond to specific frequencies, changing its density, its rigidity, and its structural state, could function as a lock with no mechanical components whatsoever. No hinges, no latches, just sound. The Sumerians described that technology. Thousands of years before, we discovered the physics that would make it theoretically possible. That's either the greatest coincidence in the history of ancient writing, or it isn't a coincidence at all. The tablet is still in Berlin. You can request to see it. The Apollo seismic data is still in the scientific record. You can read it. The Clementine and LRO images of the southern polar formation are still in NASA's archive. Some of them, anyway. And the moon is still up there. Still perfectly positioned. Still the exact right size to create a total solar eclipse is a mathematical precision so improbable that astronomers call it one of the most remarkable coincidences in the solar system. The Sumerians didn't think it was a coincidence. They thought someone put it there. And somewhere, if the oldest writing in human history is telling the truth, there is a door on its surface. Sealed. Waiting. The question isn't whether we can find it. The question is whether we're ready for what's on the other side.